Coming up on Need to Know, they're often referred to as the least understood generation. And now more than ever, it's time to listen up. We're talking about millennials, and we'll hear from them what it will take to make more of their peers want to live and work here in Rochester. How do we fully integrate young professionals in the workplace? That's next. Also on the show, we take a ride in the fast lane with an electric car racing team from RIT. The group of young ladies is redefining girl power on the racetrack. And you won't believe your eyes as you watch this giant painting unfold. Need to Know starts now. I'm Sasha Ann Simons, and today for Helene Biendudy-Hofer. It's all the rage right now in the media and discussion forums to talk about how to engage millennials in the workplace. The focus is often on capitalizing on their strengths and abilities, while at the same time embracing viewpoints and approaches that might be different from their coworkers who represent other generations. Millennials currently make up 25% of the U.S. population, and statistics show that by the year 2025, these young professionals will make up 75% of the workforce. But some leaders and young professionals themselves have spoken out, saying that the so-called struggle to engage millennials is the wrong way to look at it. Rather, we should look at attracting, motivating, and keeping them around. Here's my interview with Heidi Zimmermeyer, president of the Rochester Downtown Development Corporation, Anna Liss, Managing Director of Business Development at Greater Rochester Enterprise, Seth Eshelman, founder of Stash Inc., and Andre Primus, founder and director of RockShare. Now, before we begin, I want to just clarify for our viewers, millennials are currently aged 21 to 35, and the broader group, young professionals, that's more classified as 18 to 44. And right now, working in Monroe County, we've got about 250,000 of those people. Heidi, I want to start with you. Call them the millennial majority, if you will, in the workplace right now. Can you define for us who is the millennial, and what are some characteristics of that generation that make them unique?
I think we're seeing a very different worldview come out of this generation, and I see it in my own kids, and we're seeing it in the workforce. My particular organization has all millennials that work for it except for me. So I found it to impact the way the workforce, the actual workplace needs to be conducted. And I think we're seeing millennials demand a lot more out of their employers. There's a much stronger sense about locally produced things, about sourcing of products and foods. There's a sort of a meaning aspect to what you do in business, that it's got to have more than just profit motivation. And I think the lifestyle choices are different. This is a more urban generation, meaning people are preferring to live in urban settings. And it's changing the face of America's cities, and we're definitely seeing it here. In our particular community, we have a large number of organizations that have started up networking and kind of community-based organizations that are built by millennials that are now banding together and talking about strategy and policy and the direction of the community. It's really quite incredible.
Wow, that being said, I'd like you all to weigh in. What are some of the key components that attract the younger generation to any particular workplace? Like, what, if you could tell business professionals what they need to do to attract young professionals to, want to live and work and play here in Rochester, what would you suggest? Andre?
I think that if I were to choose three things, it would be flexibility, meaning, and opportunities for leadership. I think that, most of the people that I see, I can't speak for every millennial in the world, but most of the people that I know really are looking for, some sort of meaning in their work, and they want that meaning to extend into their professional lives or personal lives. And because of the melding between professional and personal, you need to have flexibility. You need to be able to, have some flexibility in hours, flexibility in job description, and I think that commensurate with all that is this opportunity for leadership. When people are looking for meaning, or when they have purpose-driven goals, then they're really going to want to be able to invest as a leader in what they're doing, as opposed to just a follower. So,
Anna?
Dovetailing on Andre's point about flexibility, if you look at companies out on the West Coast, in these big tech hubs that are really working hard to attract young talent, their benefits packages are all structured around basically flexibility. You have unlimited vacation, some companies give you the day off on your birthday, flexibility in hours. Look at, Google, Facebook, they have created workplace environments that are recreational in nature and full of amenities that would make somebody want to stay there all day long. Daycare, talking about family leave, encouraging young people with families to feel comfortable working for a company just because they know that they'll be taken care of when they have kids. So I think benefits is a key component.
That's actually, it's a really challenging question. I would say, being one of the employers and entrepreneurs at the table who have a company with a team of people, it's tough. I mean, it's easy to talk about all of the things that you can bring in as a benefit or as a lifestyle option for your employees, but actually managing that team can be the most challenging part of the whole thing. And we're in a particular industry that we're manufacturing and service-based. A lot of the companies you see out there who bring on these different benefits or flexible hours or other things that allow them to give their employees space to be themselves. We've embraced that wholeheartedly. We create a very open environment for our employees, and we give them the opportunity to take leave when they need to, have vacations with their families, whatever they need to do to maintain their happiness, including working from home or working remotely. That's one thing that we try to embrace as a company. But as a manufacturer, your guy on the floor can't really take his machine home to go work.
Right.
So that, I think, is one of the more challenging aspects that we're constantly learning from our employees, how to bridge the gap between the service side and the manufacturing side.
Absolutely. It looks different, across the board.
Sure.
Now, locally, you're familiar with Rock City Coalition and their recent Vision 2025 report. So that group has partnered with local young professional groups, and that helped them compile, after doing some surveys with young professionals, it helped them compile a 74-page draft report on sort of what are all the things that young professionals want, the topic that everyone seems to be talking about. One of the things, when I spoke with the organization, they told me that one of the things they struggled with was making sure that they were inclusive and that they engaged the minority population. They felt that that group wasn't too particularly engaged. Did you have any suggestions, Andre, as to how to engage that population in particular?
Well, this is something that I've been thinking about lately, because it really is some of the same things. A lot of the when they talk about the millennial generation, a lot of the time we're talking about younger, wealthier white millennials, and they're the ones that have led the push into these new workspaces, and they're the ones that have had the social capital to demand things like more flexibility in hours. And I think that as they were the trailblazers in some of these businesses that have been harder for other groups to get into, I think we're starting to see that these are the same things. These are just basic things that people want. We're finding that people who might be in situations where, because of their economic or cultural situation, they got pregnant at a younger age, and now that's harder for them to move into the workforce because they have a child. But now with these more flexible hours, they're able to do things like that. And so I think that we're really being able to see that it's not, we need to make sure, when we're doing studies like this, that we are connecting to all groups. And there are some basic things you can do to that, really. Getting engaged, having people who look like them be able to go and talk to them, things like that. But we're finding that a lot of their needs are very similar. and these are just basic human needs, and that everyone is really willing to work harder and work better when they are able to have meaning and have flexibility.
So there's no need for any segregation, basically, is what you're saying. No, separating.
Yeah, there's no need for segregating things. You need to ask everyone, because there will be things that will pop up that are different between populations that people don't expect.
Yeah. How important, Heidi, is location here when millennials are choosing workplaces? Is the downtown a desirable choice?
Downtowns are interesting because they're taking on a new role nationwide. And one of the things that's shifted is geography of innovation, for example. And innovation companies are driven by millennial workforce. So all of that's kind of wrapped up together. And we're seeing kind of a movement across the country for innovation companies to choose center city or urban locations. And we're seeing that in the city of Rochester. It's not just downtown. There are other parts of the city where we're seeing that kind of begin to happen. And I think the other thing that needs to be said, kind of piggybacking on what Andre's talking about, is that this particular generation is the most diverse generation ever in this country. And if we're going to understand what a true 21st century community looks like, we've got to recognize what's driving change. And that means that there need to be seats at the table, whether it's in your workplace or whether it's developing community policy and public policy, direction for a community, all those kinds of things. And communication is complicated. You know, we found, and I'll just mention one incident where there was a guy who's actually a tech entrepreneur, African American, and he walked into one of our more typical high-tech incubators, and he turned around and walked out because he didn't feel comfortable. So we're going to have to find ways, as our own community is talking more and more about race, about structural racism, about how to create seats at the table for everybody. And that includes pathways to prosperity and all the language that we're all using. But this is a very real street level thing. And so how we communicate, who we bring to the table, what questions are asked, who's doing the asking, all of these things are frankly far more important now. I mean, they've always been important, but they're going to be far more important as the racial and ethnic constitution of the U.S. population shifts.
Yeah. Speaking of shifts, another shift has happened is, millennials are bosses. And, people, the older generation at the workplace is now having to answer to, Gen X and Gen Y and millennials. Is that something that you're seeing? And how do you think the older generation is responding to that?
Oh, yeah. So my mom works for the University of Rochester Medical Center, and her boss is a millennial. And she actually enjoys it because it encourages her, she's a baby boomer, to think outside the box, be more creative. And I am seeing that companies that Greater Rochester Enterprise works with, we're seeing a lot of millennials, like Seth, for example, with staff that answers to them. And I think it's encouraging members of my generation to, we're stepping up to the plate and taking on more responsibility, and we're acting more like adults, So it's definitely influencing the workplace environments across Rochester's landscape in good ways and in ways that are challenging to baby boomers, older people that are having to change their schedules, change their behaviors based on the new energy in the workplace. And at GRE even, we have, I think, 5 generations on our team. So we're working with a career coach that's helping us to kind of meet one another where we're comfortable, and we're all finding ways to work with each other in ways that are nimble and giving deference to one another. So.
Are community connections and volunteering, are those important too? How do those kind of rank on the priority list?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a core value that Stash has as part of a benefit corporation, and that larger community that we are joined by many companies around the world. Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, obviously, to name a few. But that's actually a driving force that we encourage our employees to take time off if they want to go volunteer. Well, we'll pay you to go volunteer, go engage with your community, and whatever interests them as a person, we want to make sure that we can encourage that.
That's interesting. So the message here, to bosses and to companies then is, to understand that the workplace looks different. Things are changing, and you have to be able to adapt. Is that basically what we're saying here?
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This is very important, this discussion. I actually look forward to hoping to have you guys back in the future.
Sure.
Heidi Zimmermeyer, Andre Primus, Anna Liss, and Seth Eshelman. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And you can take a look at the full Vision 25 report as mentioned online. Just go to rockcitycoalition.org/vision-2025. On some level, all art is impermanent. Materials break down, paint chips away, and canvases tear. But that's not usually on the forefront of the mind of the average artist. Nate Hodge is different. The process he takes in painting is one of embracing change. Take a look and see for yourself as this artist lets us in on his process.
This body of work started in 2013 when I started working more objectively. A lot of the stuff that I'd been doing before was like post-impressionism, there was like some surrealism. All of it was kind of going in a bunch of different directions. I wound up, on a suggestion, just combining all of them together instead of doing like 6 or 7 different paintings into like one painting. And it wound up feeling like incredibly complicated and busy. And so from there, the idea was to move out onto a bigger surface and let the ideas just kind of expand. And that was how I started working more non-objectively, more abstract, and that was the seeds for this show here. A lot of my work winds up being a reflection on temporality or the continual changing nature of things that I see going on. It can be kind of daunting walking up to like a surface and not having anything there, and you've got this big, huge like blank space staring at you. When I start with a piece, it's a continuous line drawing. So I wind up treating the surface as like a landscape. So my paintings start out with an initial mark, and then the next washes or series of marks after that are responses to the initial disturbance. And if I can go across the whole entire space, then I've pretty much done a painting. And I could, at any point, like walk away from it. But I want to go beyond that and push myself into areas where I'm uncomfortable, where I'm like forcing myself to really question, like, why did you just paint over that? I'm looking to have every piece that I walk away from be the one that's like, that's probably the best thing that I've done. I'm looking to get better every single time.
That story originally aired on WXXI TV's Arts in Focus, a great way to connect to the arts community in Rochester. Joining me now is that award-winning artist you just saw. Nate Hodge is here. So is Jonathan Binstock, director at the Memorial Art Gallery. Welcome to the program. Now, Nate's latest work of art has taken him to the mag. Jonathan, can you just tell us about Inhabited Space and why was Nate the choice to get the job done?
We have a gallery called the Hurlbut Gallery. It resembles a corridor, perhaps, although it's a more accurately an intimate space for looking at works on paper and kind of getting close to the artwork. We decided that it would be exciting to fill the entire space with a painting, a site-specific painting. Nate came to mind because I saw his work on Atlantic Avenue near Couch Street, I believe. He was working on a mural for Wall Therapy, part of the Wall Therapy project here in Rochester. The mural, when I saw him begin it, it was okay. I wasn't sure what he was doing, but I did learn his name. I drove back a couple of weeks later and was absolutely blown away by what he had created. It's actually an incredible mural, and I encourage everybody to go see the mural on Atlantic Avenue. But that and that Wall Therapy project was the inspiration for inviting him to come to the Memorial Art Gallery.
Absolutely. Where do you draw your inspiration from? I know Jonathan just hinted to, and we just saw it in the package as well. You start with this continuous line and it just kind of takes a life of its own.
Yeah, I like to think about the most exciting part for a painting for me is the process when things are like changing. And so I like to like start with just like one dot and then kind of almost treat the lines as like plants or like moss or lichen that wind up spreading over the whole entire surface and sometimes even like into like the environment. So it's very much about like change. It's about like sometimes like random things that can push you in like different directions. It's like very like exploratory, and that's like kind of like my jump off for paintings.
Now, you worked on this one for weeks, but how long does it usually take you to create a piece?
It depends. I can do like smaller pieces, you know, in a couple hours, and other times I'll work on like certain canvases for months. Sometimes I'll like leave them alone and then come back to them months after I've stopped working on them to like revisit them with different thoughts or like different exercises.
Jonathan, walk me through the planning process at the MAG just a little bit. How do you decide what you showcase in your space, and is the community involved at all in your decision?
That's a complicated question. How do we decide? I mean, I think that there's a lifetime of looking and thinking about art that goes into our decision-making process about what we're going to show. We want to show a variety of art. We want there to be something for everyone. So while Nate's mural is on view, we will also feature a photography exhibition of the work of Robert Polidori, who photographs architectural interiors around the world. Our permanent collection is always on view. We're planning a new media arts or video art program that's going to bring moving images into the museum. We're going to also feature M.C. Escher, kind of an early 20th century graphic artist. So as a general art museum, we're trying to create a variety of programming that will interest a broad audience. And is the community involved? Not tremendously. I mean, it's really a question for MAG leadership, the senior staff. That is to say, what we show and when we show it is a matter that we want people deeply involved in the art world to be working on.
Absolutely. Nate, thinking about this mural and other projects that you've done in the past, how different was this, knowing that the audience was watching you while you worked?
Yeah, that took a little bit of getting used to. Like working in public, sometimes you get used to like people like walking by and like saying stuff to you. But this was like a little bit more concentrated, where there were groups of like school kids that would like come through, and sometimes they'd have questions. And there was also like a cordoned section where people could only go like so far up to me. So like to a certain extent, that kind of threw me off like a little bit, because like when you're working on a piece, when you step up to a surface or like a canvas or a piece of paper, like I think about it as like a battle, you know, and like in certain places the surface could win, you know, like I could walk away from it not completing like what I set out to do. And so to have that unfold in front of like such a wide audience, and also have it unfold in the MAG where there's like, you know, like, and we've got like works by like El Greco, we've got works by like international artists and like more like contemporary artists through like a huge span of centuries, and I'm doing something at the same time. It's a little bit more daunting than like, you know, on like a street or like in like my own studio or something.
So very quickly, Nate, where can we find your work? Tell me your website.
My website is masiori.com, masiori.com.
Thank you. Special thank you to my guests, Nate and Jonathan, for stopping by today. There's still time to quickly head over to the Memorial Art Gallery for the big reveal of the final product tonight. That goes until 9 o'clock. An opening party takes place on Saturday. All the details are on your screen. For more information, go to mag.rochester.edu. It started in the classroom and became hands-on in the machine shop. That's where a group of female students from RIT built an 82-horsepower, 700-pound electric hybrid Formula-style race car. Hot Wheels is now competing in the big leagues. Earlier this month, the women drove the car in the team's first international race. But it wasn't all smooth sailing on the track. Take a look. This car is unlike most others on the roads.
It has 4 open wheels, not like a passenger car where it's all enclosed. It has 2 roll bars to keep the driver safe and rollover impact, and it has to be powered by an electric motor with high-powered lithium-ion batteries.
The electric car is called Hot Wheels. It's the end result of a 2-year project built by an all-female group of engineering students at the Rochester Institute of Technology.
We have to do all the frame design, the parts design, all ourselves.
Positive is always on the right.
It's one of those rare moments when the job requires no experience. The students are a mix of different backgrounds and majors who have formed a team out of interest and curiosity to see whether all the research could pay off.
We set out to do a 2-year design and build phase. The actual design started in January of 15, and we designed all the way through about December, and then we really started the build heavily in January of 16.
With their eyes set on a major competition, the women put the finishing touches on Hot Wheels in early May.
Yeah, Maura. You got this.
Next, they were off to the races at the New Hampshire International Speedway. The tilt test is one safety check that ensures no leaking from the vehicle. 30 teams from across the globe put their creativity to the test at the Formula Hybrid, a design and engineering challenge for college students. Hot Wheels passed an initial mechanical inspection with flying colors, but later a close call would put the women in jeopardy of hitting the track.
I slammed on the brakes, and it was just way too much force in the front, and it actually turned the bottom and the front suspension twisted over each other, so it completely just ripped apart one of our wheel assemblies.
She was in the car, I was out of the car, so I had a different perspective. I just saw everything crinkle, and I was just like, oh no.
Time was of the essence, so the women quickly put their thinking caps on. The mistake cost them a few rounds of the competition. Then, finally, the electric car remained powered up for nearly 12 miles.
We came together as a team in the rest of that day to really pull together and show that we might have had a failure, but we're a team to be reckoned with, and we're going to get back out there. We're not done, and we're here to compete.
Hot Wheels' brightly colored technical design won the team third place, and they finished third in the overall competition. But the women say it was a different prize that made this all worthwhile.
We actually walked away with 2 professionalism and management awards.
When things got rough, the team found a unique way to lighten the mood.
We dance. So I think they've never really seen that type of an atmosphere before, where everyone just gets around the car and starts doing the wobble. But that's how we build morale.
And there's no doubt the hands-on experience created bonds and friendships they will take with them down whatever road they travel.
We've seen so many girls, even young first and second years, transform just in this past semester, their level of confidence and understanding of things just because of this team.
This story was part of Innovation Trail, a reporting project that explores the link between technological breakthroughs and the revitalization of upstate New York. And that's it for this edition of Need to Know. I'm Sasha Ann Simons. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend right here on WXXI TV.